Scorched wreckage is all that's left after a fatal air disaster in Quincy, Illinois.
It was really a molten mess, to be frank.
Witnesses recount a stunning detail.
I could hear passengers shouting out.
Everyone who died survived the initial impact.
You evacuate. I'll shut down.
To know that they survived an accident and weren't able to get out is hard.
Open the door!
I tried everything I could do in the world, and I could not get that door to unlatch.
Investigators face a tragic and puzzling question.
Why didn't that door open?
I'm sorry, Kate.
I was literally their last hope.
It's late afternoon. The crew of United Express Flight 5925 is nearing the end of a long workday.
Doors and windows are closed and locked. Loads checked.
Captain Kate Gatke and First Officer Darren McCombs have been on the job for 12 hours, piloting a string of commuter flights across the Midwest.
Batteries on. Avionics are off.
They're about to start their final leg, a short 20-minute flight. There are 10 passengers in the cabin, but on a short hop like this, no flight attendants. The pre-flight announcement is automated.
Welcome aboard. Before we begin our flight, we'd like to review some important safety features. Please observe.
With the automated message, it's human nature. Most of us really aren't paying that much of attention. When it's a recording, it's like a commercial in the background. Who's really paying attention at all?
There are 4 exits aboard this aircraft. Please take a few moments to familiarize.
The Beechcraft 1900C is a twin-engine turboprop, often used as a regional commuter plane.
V1. V2. Positive rate.
This is the 8th takeoff of the day for the pilots.
Gears up. Lights are out.
Starting in Quincy, Illinois, they've puddle jumped from one airport to the next, across 3 states. They switched planes in Chicago, and now they're on their way back to where they started, Quincy.
Multiple takeoff and landings is very challenging for a pilot. You're increasing your chance of an accident much more than, let's say, a captain on a major airline who's flying a large airliner and flying to Asia. He takes off once, 14 hours later he lands once, and he gets 2 days off and he comes home. In those last 3 days, the commuter pilot's done 30 landings.
Climb power set. Checks complete.
30-year-old Kate Gatke was born to fly. Her family runs a flight school in Minnesota, where she made her first solo flight when she was just 16. She's recently been promoted to captain, a big step towards her dream of flying for the majors.
What's the winds down there?
First Officer McCombs is 24 years old, with nearly 2,000 hours of flight time. For this final leg, he's at the controls, and the captain is handling the radio.
That's done a lot to get the first officers more experience and get them up to speed so that they can transition into being a full-time captain.
Winds are 060 at 8, 12 miles visibility.
Their final destination is Quincy Regional Airport, where Paul Walker is working as chief pilot for a flight school.
It's not real busy, but it's not completely quiet either. You're liable to see anything from a little single-place home-built airplane to a C-5 Galaxy sitting on the ramp.
There are 3 intersecting runways at Quincy. Most planes take off and land on runway 13, or runway number 4. The small airport is one of thousands across the country without a tower. That means there are no controllers to direct traffic. Pilots must communicate directly with each other during takeoff and landing. It's now 9 minutes before touchdown.
About 30 miles to the north of the field, inbound for landing runway 13 at Quincy. Any traffic in the area, please advise.
Captain Gatke radios in on an open frequency, used by all pilots at Quincy.
All right. Power is set.
At an airport like Quincy that is non-towered, you cannot be too vigilant when you're flying an airplane. You have to have a situational awareness to realize what's probably going to be coming next and where other aircraft are.
Look at that sunset, man. That's gorgeous.
As they begin their descent with no tower to guide them, Captain Gatke's radio communications are critical. But she's used to it. Uncontrolled airports are a commuter pilot's bread and butter.
Well, there's rules and there's regulations on the proper procedures to fly in and out of airports without towers, untowered airports. There is still control, but there's just not somebody there sitting, watching.
Air 1127. Delta's taxiing out. Takeoff on runway 4.
They're using 4.
A King Air A90, a much smaller twin turboprop, is taxiing out to runway 4. The pilot is Neil Reinwald, a retired TWA captain. Today, he's instructing Laura Brooks.
Okay, let's review procedures before takeoff. What's our takeoff weight?
A far less experienced pilot, Brooks is looking to build up her flight hours on multi-engine planes. It's her first time in a King Air.
You're using 13 still, right?
Yeah, unless it doesn't look good.
Aviation, just as when you drive a vehicle, is a see and be seen world. Pilots are taught to look out the windows, and this works well every day all over the world.
King Air 1127, Delta holding short of runway 4. To take in the runway for departure.
The commuter plane is now 90 seconds to touchdown. The King Air is in position and holding.
Position and hold is when an aircraft pulls onto the end of the runway, turns, points down the runway, prepared for takeoff. That's just what it says, holds its position.
5-mile final for runway 13 Quincy. Gear down. 3 green.
Fuel check. Okay. Navigation set. And radar set for takeoff.
The captain, it was a nice day. The winds were light. He's thinking about, okay, we got a nice, easy flight home. The first officer's going to do some flying. I'm going to do some instructing.
As the commuter plane descends,
500.
An automated voice in the cockpit gives the pilots their altitude.
On short final for runway 13.
400.
The aircraft going to hold in position on runway 4, or you guys going to take off?
7646 Juliet, holding for departure on runway 4. 200.
King Air.
Okay, we'll get through your intersection in just a second, sir. We appreciate that. Finals are complete.
At the same moment, flight instructor Paul Walker is in a hangar at Quincy Airport.
I'd walked about 10, 15 feet inside the door. While all this had been going on, the King Air had been starting, taxiing out.
Max reverse.
We heard this explosion that rattled the walls and the windows shut. I ran for the door, and as I came outside, what I saw looked like a mushroom cloud from when you see the films of the atomic bombs going off. I thought the King Air had some sort of malfunction and crashed on takeoff.
But the disaster unfolding in Quincy, Illinois is far worse than Paul Walker imagines. At Quincy Airport, Paul Walker rushes toward burning wreckage on the runway.
I would say I was at the crash site in less than a minute and a half.
As he draws closer to the fire, Walker makes a bone-chilling discovery. It's not only the King Air engulfed in flame. 2 planes are on fire.
I could see through the smoke the Beech 1900 said United Express on it, at which time I had the most sickening feeling in the world that that airplane could be completely full of people.
You evacuate. I'll set down.
The lives of 4 pilots and 10 passengers are now at risk, with no firefighters at the tiny airport to help with the rescue.
Well, as an investigator, always was worried about, is this going to happen and when? And we've been lucky many times. At Quincy, the luck ran out.
Open the door! Please! Someone help! Open the door! Open the door!
Another pilot comes to help Walker on the runway.
Where's the door?
It appeared to me to be that he was just in shock.
Hey, I hear people in there. We have to get inside that plane. The main door. It's over here.
United Express pilot Mike Rowe was supposed to fly the 1900 on its next scheduled flight. The main exit, an air stair door, is directly behind the cockpit.
I grabbed the handle and attempted to open the door. The heat was just very intense. Obviously, the most heat I've ever felt in my life. Tremendous amount of smoke. The aircraft was rapidly being consumed by the fire. When I wiggled the handle a little bit, somebody on the inside wiggled it the other way.
I can't get it open! Open the door!
As he hears the captain's desperate cries, Walker suddenly realizes
Oh, God! It's you! Hang in there, Kate!
he's met Kate Gatke before.
Open the door!
When I came around the wing of the commuter, I did not expect there to be someone in it that I actually knew.
Please help!
The fact that you actually know somebody in that situation at that time just added more to it.
Hang in there, Kate!
Hey! Open the door!
Okay, hang on! Here! You have to push the button before turning the handle!
The other gentleman goes up and pushes the button. I thought, I didn't push the button.
Oh, God, I can't!
Mike Rowe rushes to get more help, leaving Paul Walker hauling desperately on the door of the burning plane.
When I went back to the door the second time, there was no doubt in my mind I was going to get that door open. I'm 6'3" 20 years ago and thought I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof. I tried everything I could do in the world and I could not get that door to unlatch.
Oh, God! I'm sorry, Kate!
I can't get him!
I'm gonna get help!
Leaving the airplane was one of the more difficult things I've ever done in my life. When I looked at the captain, there was part of me that knows that she knew that by the time I got back, it would be too late. That I was literally their last hope.
Moments later, all hope for the crash survivors is lost.
It was easily less than 2 minutes from the time I was standing by the left wing till it exploded. I felt like I failed.
Despite Paul Walker's heroic efforts, 4 pilots and 10 passengers are dead. It's one of the worst runway accidents in North American history.
Over the years, I've come to rationalize it in my mind that you know, there were 10 or 12 people at the airport, and of 10 or 12 people, only 2 of us went to the crash scene, and I was the first one to it, and I was the last one to leave. And that's helped me. At least I tried. I may have failed, but I tried.
It's a tragedy, the likes of which the small city of Quincy has never seen. And in Minnesota, the Gatke family is devastated.
Kate's dreams of someday flying the big jets began right in her own backyard. That's where her family's flying school is.
I think Katie did everything she could have to get out of that situation and to protect the people she had in her plane.
By early morning, a team of investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board gets to work. Tom Howder is lead investigator. It's his job to determine how a seemingly routine landing ended with so many deaths.
You could sort of make out airplanes, that it was very burned. You could see wingtips, you could see parts, you could say, yes, those are 2 airplanes, but it was really a molten mess, to be frank.
With no survivors from either plane, investigators must rely on physical evidence to tell them what went wrong.
They put down an awful lot of rubber.
Skid marks on runway 13 reveal that the United Express pilot hit the brakes hard, 145 meters before the point of impact.
There's just these 2 massive black lines going from just after touchdown to where the 2 airplanes collided. So he was on the brakes the whole time. Certainly flat spotted the tires, and in my opinion, probably blew the tires in the process.
Skid marks on the intersecting runway tell a similar story. It seems both planes braked hard and swerved, but couldn't stop from colliding.
How did this happen? It was also a clear day, it was good weather. So everything looks like this accident shouldn't have occurred. So trying to put it together, what happened on this day? Where did the faults come into play that caused these airplanes to collide at the intersection of 2 runways?
Howder studies the wreckage, trying to piece together a detailed picture of the fatal collision.
Okay, let's figure this thing out.
Most of the wreckage is destroyed or badly scorched, but a few key pieces tell the tale.
Well, we have some missing paint and a good-sized dent. This is definitely from the collision.
The nose of the King Air is dented, and its blue paint has been scraped away.
And here, this is the prop from the United, which means that blue paint came from the King Air.
So you can look at the paint transfer marks, and you have a pretty good idea that the angle that the airplanes came together.
This is a side swipe. It looks like they tried to squeak past each other, but then their noses touched, and then they just got tangled up together.
They essentially hit side to side.
Max reverse.
Investigators calculate the United Express plane touched down with a speed of 194 kilometers an hour. By the time the crew saw the plane on runway 4, it was too late. The King Air is accelerating towards the same point at about 185 kilometers an hour. It takes just 7 seconds for the 2 planes to collide. The team now knows how the 2 planes met, but they still have no idea what caused the crash.
Why did these 2 airplanes come together? Is there something in the aircraft, something the pilots did?
To fully understand the tragedy at Quincy, Howder needs answers to those critical questions. The town of Quincy, Illinois, is in mourning. 14 people are dead after a fiery crash. NTSB investigators are under the gun. Amidst the charred debris, they make a major find. The cockpit voice recorder from United Express 5925.
This cockpit voice recorder is very important in a situation like this. What was the crew saying? What were they thinking? When both the crew are fatal, the only thing you have is a CVR to tell you exactly what happened at that moment.
They rush the CVR to NTSB headquarters in Washington. Investigators are hoping the data inside has survived the fire. As head of the operations group, David Ivey focuses his attention on pilot behavior.
This accident is probably one of the most unusual that I had investigated in my career.
Somehow, the pilots didn't see each other coming, despite the clear skies.
On short final for runway 13.
Why did all this, on such a clear night, with no restrictions to visibility, occur?
While Ivy waits for word on the all-important cockpit voice recording, he gets what he can from witnesses.
Hi, Dave. I'm Paul.
Come on, have a seat.
I had personally never been around a crash investigation of any type. I was very impressed with it. What they came in and did, just a very class act, very professional.
I raced out there as fast as I could after I heard the crash.
Walker didn't see the collision, but he provides investigators with a chilling detail about the accident.
I could see Kate. She was crying out for help. I could hear passengers shouting out too.
There's no doubt passengers on board Flight 5925 survived the collision. But the aircraft had two overwing emergency exits on the right and another on the left, as well as the main door Walker tried to open. So why couldn't anyone escape the smoke-filled plane?
Hurry! Get the door open! Okay, hang on!
The fact that they all perished in this accident was overwhelmingly a tragedy. But I felt the obligation to find out why this occurred.
Investigators now face a dual challenge, figuring out why two planes collided on the runway and why none of the crash survivors got out alive.
I can't get it open! Open the door!
Nora Marshall is an expert in crash survival factors. Why no one escaped Flight 5925 is a puzzle she wants to solve.
The thing that stands out in my mind is that these people had a chance, if the exits had opened, to survive.
Right away, Marshall is struck by how little fire damage the left side of the plane has sustained.
The left side of the airplane was not part of the original fire. So we knew there was an opportunity for people to get out the air stair door or the left overwing exit. So why didn't that happen?
Autopsy reports on the passengers and crew only add to the mystery. In every case, the cause of death was smoke inhalation. There are no physical injuries severe enough to have caused death.
The fact that there was no blunt force trauma indicates that the passengers and the crew would have been capable of moving to an exit. And that's a critical fact.
Marshall painstakingly tracks the final positions of the bodies and uses them to recreate the passengers' movements after the collision.
And there were actually more of the remains in the forward cabin, and there were fewer remains in the back. So it allowed us to know that people from the back had moved forward in the cabin before being overcome.
The most likely explanation: the terrified passengers rushed for the main door, forgetting about the overwing exits.
In moments of panic, people normally tend to go to the door they came in from. People rarely think about the overwing exits, especially in these smaller aircraft.
It immediately becomes the question of why wasn't the door opened?
So what position was it in when you first got there?
Like this.
The air stair door now becomes the focus of Marshall's investigation.
Yeah, I'm 100% sure that's it.
As the first person to reach the door, Paul Walker's testimony is key. He's certain he found the handle in the 6 o'clock or open position.
Finding the handle in the 6 o'clock position suggested to me that the first officer had moved the handle to the open position.
It's the first officer's responsibility to open the exit doors.
The first officer got out of his chair and got to the door. The people would think, oh, he's going to open the door, we're going to get right out. That's the door he came in on. That's the way I should get back out of it. Follow the first officer. That's where he is. That's very easily done. But they've not realized how fast the situation is going bad and how bad it's going to get. I can imagine it was total chaos inside that cabin very quickly.
Someone help!
Emergency procedures call for the captain to shut down the airplane while the evacuation is underway.
I can't get it open!
First Officer McComb's body was found between the main door and the left overwing exit. The position makes sense to Marshall.
Crew members are taught, if your door doesn't open, don't waste a lot of time, get to another exit. And I believe where we found him indicates that he was moving to another exit.
But in the overpowering smoke and heat, First Officer McCombs never made it to another exit.
Had the air stair door opened right away, it may have allowed everybody off the airplane.
12 lives might have been saved if only the door had opened.
To know that they survived an accident and weren't able to get out is hard. It's very hard.
So with a handle like this, the door should open.
The focus now shifts to the mechanics of the door itself. Fire in the cabin severely damaged the door frame, but the main components have all been recovered.
Okay, let's see what this can tell us.
The locking mechanism is simple, with 3 cam locks on each side. A single cable connects the door handle to the cams. When the handle turns, the cable rotates all the cams to lock or unlock the door.
The cams have to rotate about 150 degrees from the locked position for the door to be open. We found that the cams were all either locked or partially locked.
What could have prevented them from unlocking?
What have we here?
Marshall discovers the locking cable is fractured. This could be the smoking gun she's been looking for.
With the cable having been snapped, you would want to understand that, because if it was not intact, it wasn't going to rotate the cams.
But confirming the theory requires more analysis. If she can prove that the cable snapped on impact, Marshall will have solved the mystery of the jammed door that cost 12 people their lives.
I can't get it open!
Lab tests on the cable that locks and unlocks the main door are a disappointment. The critical component did not break on impact.
The cable had broken, and the metallurgist determined that that was a result of heat and stress from the post-crash fire.
Okay, hang on!
In other words, the critical cable didn't break until after the fire killed everyone on board. What jammed the door is still a mystery.
Then we're back to, okay, why didn't the door open?
The plane's manufacturer advises Marshall that the air stair door on the 1900C will not open if there's even a small amount of slack in the locking cable.
If there was a 1/4 inch of slack or greater in the cable, that the cams would not rotate.
Slack in the cable? Is that what happened?
It's a slim margin of error, and it leads to a new theory.
During the collision, the door frame or the door itself could have been deformed in a way that would introduce slack.
A tragedy of small failures, a damaged door, a bit of slack in a cable, might have been the difference between life and death.
Oh, God, I'm sorry, Kate. I'm going for help. I can't get him.
If he had more time, First Officer McCombs might have reached the overwing exit, which could have saved lives.
We're used to accidents where people are so badly injured they can't get out. Here, all the indications are everybody survived the impact and could have gotten out had they had a little bit more time.
But the doors would never have been an issue if there hadn't been an accident. Why the two planes collided on a clear fall evening remains the biggest mystery.
Okay, let's go.
There was no cockpit voice recorder in the King Air. Smaller planes don't require one, but investigators hope to find some answers in the cockpit recording from Flight 5925.
What's the winds down there?
Oh, that's First Officer McCombs.
Winds are 060 at 8, 12 miles visibility.
Stop. And that's Captain Gatke.
Getting the CVR back in this case was very important. It allowed us to understand what was the tone of the cockpit, what were they doing, was anything missed, trying to understand the sequence of events that occurred.
About 30 miles to the north of the field, inbound for landing runway 13 at Quincy.
So far, so good?
As the H1900 approached Quincy, it made all the required radio calls. Quincy traffic, we're approaching the area, we're this far out. Quincy traffic, we're now this far out.
3 at Quincy. Any traffic in the area, please advise.
Captain Gatke gives other pilots a chance to let her know if they want to use the runway. She gets no response. More than 3 minutes pass before Laura Brooks radios in from the King Air.
King Air 1127, Delta's taxiing out. Takeoff on runway 4.
Sounds like the students handling the radio calls.
They're using 4.
Stop. See, that tells me they heard the King Air. They know it was approaching the runway, and they're watching for it.
Kate Gatke is making all the right calls. But it isn't clear if the pilots in the King Air heard any of them.
We'll be inbound to enter on the left base for runway 13 at Quincy. Any other traffic, please advise.
No response? Where's the King Air?
It's more than 2 minutes before Laura Brooks makes her second and final transmission.
King Air 1127, holding short of runway 4. Taken the runway for departure.
Less than a minute to touchdown. The King Air is still holding. Captain Gatke double-checks whether the King Air intends to stay put on runway 4 while she lands on 13.
The aircraft going to hold a position on runway 4. You guys going to take off.
What investigators hear next comes as a complete surprise.
7646 Juliet, holding for departure on runway 4.
Who the hell's answering her? That's not the King Air.
It's a stunning development. There was a radio call from a second plane waiting to take the runway.
That little communication was critical to what happened on this accident.
Hi, yes, I need some help tracking down a pilot who was at Quincy Airport on November 19th.
Tom Howder is now on the hunt for a mystery pilot.
He was right there when it happened. So we wanted to talk to him. What did you know? What did you see? What was going on?
She knew the King Air was there. She announced her intentions. How did the King Air not get that she was coming into land?
King Air 1127, Delta's taxiing out. Takeoff on runway 4. They're using 4.
It's clear the United Express crew knew the location of the King Air. It's not clear if the King Air crew ever heard Captain Gatke, but her plane would have been clearly visible in the sky. Did something prevent the King Air pilots from seeing it? Computer simulations show that posts in the King Air's windscreen might have obstructed the pilot's view.
think we need to put ourselves in a real plane.
But to be sure, Ivy wants to return to the scene of the crash.
I don't think there's anything better than a pair of eyes in a real situation that is as similar or as close to what occurred during the accident sequence.
David Ivy tries out both pilot seats in the King Air while in position on runway 4. He watches as a Beech 1900C approaches with its landing lights on.
It flew downwind, made a left turn to a final approach, and we were looking at what we could see. The lights, how visible was the airplane.
I can see you, clear as day.
It was readily visible the entire time. There were no obstructions due to the window post, whether it was forward or the aft window post.
Landing aircraft always have the right of way. It seems inconceivable that a pilot would roll onto an intersecting runway, knowing a plane was on final approach.
It's incumbent upon you to look both directions before you get out there. We learned that as children crossing the street. Look both ways.
Ivy comes to an astonishing conclusion. The King Air pilots must not have checked for incoming planes before starting down the runway.
You look at something as basic as see and avoid, which pilots are taught from day one. How could that go missing?
What the hell?
David Ivy turns his attention to King Air pilot Neil Reinwald, combing through his FAA records and talking to people he's worked with.
He had been an Air Force Reserve pilot. He had been a pilot for Trans World Airlines. His resume looked tremendous.
Why would such an experienced pilot taxi onto a runway while another plane is landing? Ivy keeps digging and soon makes a stunning discovery.
We found out that he failed a check ride. He was given another check, and he failed that, and they removed him from a pilot position to flight engineer, which is a non-flying pilot.
He failed 2 checks. This guy's skills were slipping.
After his demotion, Reinwald retired from TWA, but he stayed active as a charter pilot and flight instructor. 6 months before this accident, Reinwald was an instructor on a training flight that landed with the landing gear still up.
Did some damage to the prop, the engine, and to the fuselage.
Reinwald was assigned remedial training after the incident, training that was still underway when he boarded the King Air for his final flight.
Okay, Laura, let's go home.
Students describe him as skilled and confident, a real go-getter, but with a tendency to rush. On the day of the fatal crash, witnesses say he seemed in a hurry to get home.
I think impatience was part of the problem. Get-there-itis, that's a term we use a lot.
King Air 1127, Delta's taxiing out, takeoff on runway 4.
Student pilot Laura Brooks was handling radio calls from the King Air.
She was totally new to the King Air.
Reinwald may have been preoccupied with his flight lesson, unaware of the commuter plane approaching from his left.
What's our takeoff weight?
When you're instructing, it can take you out of the situational awareness.
8,117 pounds.
You might be trying to teach them how to program something. You might be discussing with them about power settings before takeoff. There's so many different things you could be discussing.
Whether they were engaged in conversation about the aircraft, we don't know. But there was no announcement of takeoff, which is unusual.
It appears both pilots were dangerously distracted.
They weren't looking at the big picture of where they were at and what was going on around them in the world.
The story of the Quincy crash has one final twist, an incredible coincidence involving the mystery pilot investigators have been desperately waiting to hear from.
So, tell us what happened.
A Piper Cherokee waits to take off moments before the crash. At the controls is rookie pilot Larry Bedford.
We were in the run-up area behind the King Air.
Any traffic in the area, please advise.
Bedford hears both the King Air and the commuter plane's transmissions.
King Air 11.
But he isn't always sure who's talking.
Both pilots were female.
The aircraft gonna hold a position on runway 4.
You guys gonna take off.
When the King Air doesn't respond to Captain Gatke's question, Bedford steps in.
7646 Juliet.
There was no reason for the pilot of the Cherokee, who's not on the active runway, who's not going to take off, to have made that call.
He did not use his type of airplane. If he'd said Cherokee, that would have served as a clarifying point.
Juliet, holding for departure on runway 4, behind on the King Air.
Holding behind the King Air was the statement he said he made.
Holding for departure on runway 4, behind on the King Air.
There was a mechanical device in that Beech 1900 that at the appointed time said 200.
Departure on runway 4, behind on the King Air.
And that masked the word behind the King Air.
Captain Gatke thinks the call is coming from the King Air.
Okay, we'll get through intersection in just a second, sir. We appreciate that.
Unfortunately for the commuter aircraft crew, they believed they were now safe to land because the King Air would hold for them.
Finals are complete.
They thought they were good to go.
A split-second mechanical message, combined with a rookie's confusing radio call, caused a fatal misunderstanding. The final NTSB report concludes that the crew of United Express Flight 5925 acted appropriately in their approach and landing.
Probable cause of the accident was the failure of the pilots in the King Air A90 to effectively monitor the common traffic advisory frequency or to properly scan for traffic.
The investigation also concludes that Neil Reinwald may not have placed sufficient importance on the basics of safe flying.
The collision was certainly avoidable. Had the King Air saw the other airplane, they probably would have aborted their takeoff. So it was preventable several times. But as the airplanes got closer and closer together, those timing ran out.
Contributing to the loss of life was the failure of the air stair door in the Beech 1900C to open.
But the failure of a single door on an airplane with 3 other exits should not result in the death of everyone on board.
It's critical for passengers to listen to safety briefings.
Welcome aboard.
To understand where is the closest exit. Where is it behind you? To think about how do you get out of this if you have to.
In the wake of the accident, training is improved to emphasize the importance of clear communication, especially at airports with no tower.
The FAA has been dealing with this issue, I think, in a very good manner, trying to get people to realize the awareness of it. Most dangerous place to be in an airplane is around an airport.
There have been a lot of basic changes since the Quincy accident. I think they've worked. We haven't had an accident like this since. However, we can't rest on our laurels. The pilots who are flying the commuter airplanes in uncontrolled airspace like at Quincy, they have no memory of what happened to Quincy. So it's important to remind them occasionally. We have to keep our corporate memory going, and that becomes very critical.